My pastor just asked me to give a 10-minute testimony. Something that I rarely do anymore because of the fact that I can't remember it. I remember the good things. I was raised in Hollywood. Although I look Chinese, I'm really not. I'm actually a Hollywoodite. My parents were both motion picture actors. My father, was a motion picture actor, and my mother raised in a Hollywood family and grew up around Hollywood and Beverly Hills with all the movie stars and sat on the knee of most of the biggest movie stars that have lived. People like, Burt Lancaster and Gregory Peck and June Allison and Fred Astaire, and those are people that I grew up with at our house parties and hanging around my dad's restaurants. But I was one of those people that even though I seemed to have everything, the wealthy house at the top of the Hollywood Hills overlooking all of Los Angeles and basically, being raised kind of like a spoiled child with reservation. I came to a place where I realized that everyone around me, regardless of how high they climbed their ladders, they were never, ever content. They were never happy. And I was raised in a family where we didn't really know anything about God. We didn't believe in God. Our background was basically listening to my father teach us his own philosophy and also a little bit of Chinese philosophy here and there. So we always just believed, like everybody else, that we were born into the world by accident through a cosmic explosion that happened eons ago, and a giant burp happened in the universe, and then everything came into being, and we were just going to do whatever we could to make our little dent on the planet and then go our way. But something was hardwired into my heart early on that caused me to really question these things. And so early on, I basically kind of just dropped out of the whole Hollywood, Beverly Hills, Los Angeles scene and moved down to Laguna Beach. And at the time, this is during the counterculture revolution, the 60s, where the African Americans were fighting for equal rights, and the SDS, the Students for a Democratic Society, were in full bore. But there was another movement happening at the time, and that was a enlightenment through the usage of psychedelic drugs. And coming from Hollywood, I started smoking pot when I was pretty young, but never experimented with anything harder than that until I got out of high school. And after I left high school, I moved away from my home and started to experiment with psychedelic drugs. And it was during the time I was studying, the usage of psychedelic drugs to find yourself and to find some sort of a relationship with a type of God, that I started to run into people who were very religious people. So I would study with people that were Tibetan Buddhists. I helped establish the Hare Krishna temple in Laguna Beach, and also worshiped with them and studied the Bhagavad Gita with the president of that particular house, a self-realization fellowship, Paramahansa Yogananda's people. These are all things that go way over most of your heads because you're too young to remember any of these things or even hear about them. But there was one psychologist, he was a psychiatrist by the name of Dr. Timothy Leary. You've probably heard about him in your infamous parts of your history book. When I came down to Laguna Beach, I became part of the subculture, and I was befriended because of my guitar playing mostly and singing by some musicians who lived out in the Laguna Canyon. And so I went out there to jam with them, and I was kind of adopted into the Timothy Leary family. They called themselves the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. And the Brotherhood of Eternal Love on the outside looked like just a bunch of wild little hippie people running around with really long hair. Like if you see that old picture of me that comes up on the screen, it's a little embarrassing because I was probably 200 pounds lighter then and had hair, But behind the scenes, the Brotherhood of Eternal Love was basically responsible for manufacturing most of the psychedelic drugs, LSD and other forms of psychedelic drugs that were being distributed all over the world. And I became a part of that family. And Timothy got arrested early on, and so I used to take care of his wife, Rosemary. Rosemary had connections to everyone. In fact, she was like my backstage pass to any concert back in those days. I'd walk with her up to a Moody Blues concert, and they just opened the doors because she was Dr. Leary's wife. But in that role, I had basically just found myself elevated into the same kind of funny place in society, but this is in the subculture of the society, where we had hundreds of thousands of dollars to play with every single day because of the amount of drugs that we were manufacturing and selling and import. I used to smuggle marijuana across the border down here in Mexico regularly, and we were so rich we actually used to light our joints with $100 bills to blow people's minds. But the point that I'm trying to make is that we got to the very pinnacle of where we were, and there was nothing there. All the movie stars and the rock stars and all the people that we hung out with when I was growing up, you get to the top of the ladder, there's nothing there, and you see people like just totally blitzing out and doing funny things like you see in the media today. In the hippie movement, it was the same way. And so I finally decided that I was going to really find out if there really was a God, and I took a vial of what was just the pure content of our product out to the high desert and snorted it all. It was about 150 doses of what we called sunshine LSD. And what transpired after, I can't even really explain. I do know that they couldn't resuscitate me. They couldn't get me breathing again. My heart stopped beating. And I did have one of those after or out-of-the-body experiences to a certain extent where I basically was in a place of darkness. And so everything that I had learned in the past told me that what I should do is look for the light. Look for the light, and then you're going to go into your next incarnation. You'll just be reincarnated over and over again until you get it right. You know what I mean? It sounds fun, doesn't it? And so I'm looking for the light. I'm looking for the light. There's no light. It's just total darkness, total blackness. And all of a sudden, I started to realize that I was just in darkness forever, and I was a conscious living entity living within that darkness. And as I started to succumb to it, I started to sense the presence of other souls that were in that same place, screaming and crying out in agony. And all of a sudden, I started to realize that I was one of those voices. And I remember I invoked every single name that you can imagine, every guru that I had studied under, all of their gods, every deity, every demigod that I could remember their name, and nothing happened. And the very last name that I cried out to, because I never wanted to be a Christian, was the name of Jesus. I said, Jesus, if you're real, save me. If you're real, save me. And I was screaming it at the top of my lungs. You couldn't bear it if I were to start screaming right now. And all of a sudden in that darkness, the darkness began to quake, like the whole universe was shaking, and there were flashes of light and brighter and brighter and brighter. And I actually came to in the middle of the desert, and I was alive, I was breathing, and there was a man standing in front of me whose countenance was so bright that I had to avert my eyes and my whole body away from him. And it was almost like it was noontime, and the sun was shining up above, and this person and the image and outline of this person was so bright that I couldn't look. But even when I turned around and I started to try to bury myself under the sand to get away from the sight of this person, I could still see him. And then I heard a voice that I'll never forget. I still remember it today. It makes me cry and shiver and rejoice and laugh all at the same time. It sounded like the sound of many waters. It filled every single molecule in the air, and he basically just said this. He said, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. And I remember that after I heard those words, I waited for a long time, and then I turned around, and it was gone. There were little flashes of light and everything. And, I went back home, and I remember that I told some of the people about the experience, and they thought I just had a big psychedelic experience. And my old brethren from the Brotherhood that are still alive today say that Oden flipped out on LSD and became a Jesus freak and never came back. That's my reputation. And it is true. They waited for me for years to come back. I still lived in Laguna, but what ended up happening was I met some people from Calvary Chapel after my conversion, and they would come down and play music with me and preach in my backyard right in the middle of Laguna Canyon where the whole Brotherhood lived. And this is a secret society that didn't want any strangers in the canyon. We had 300 or 400 people coming out every week to listen to people preach the gospel in the backyard. And so all this to say, it's been over pretty close to 37 years now that I first came to Calvary Chapel and met Pastor Chuck. And just, if you would just give Jesus a chance, if you just give Jesus an opportunity to come into your heart and to show you that he's real, he will. And it doesn't matter if you're young or old, or if you're on the edge of death, or if you're still living and breathing. If you just open up your heart, he will come in and you'll never be the same. I can attest to that. I'm living proof that with all of my wildness, God has taken me and transformed me into a whole different creature and creation, and it's only by the grace of God and because of his love for me and for you and for all of us. God bless you guys tonight.